You guys ready tonight?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So let me tell you a little bit about Sangre Viva first, okay? This is we're a collaborative of all of the progressive Latino arts associations in New York City. We've all been doing our individual events. I'm for example, the co-founder of Capico Poetry in Brooklyn. We also have the Exentos director, Rich Villar, who's not in the building yet. We have La Loba Poetry Series represented here, Latina Writers Group, the Babylonians, and Johnny, am I missing anyone? You're not paying attention to me, Johnny. It's okay. So today is the commencement of National Poetry Month. And what does that mean to us? Para nuestro gente, ¿verdad? Poetry, as we know today, originates from the oral traditions of the world as a means to pass down news, bochinche. Everybody loves some bochinche, right? And stories. And tonight, it's about stories. It's about creation stories and stories of origin and their importance in our lives as writers. Your story, everyone in this room, is a lot larger than you've imagined. It's made up of all of the world's messages about your identity, how you interpret that message, and what you put out into the world as a response to that message. And tonight, we will hear stories that go from ordinary to extraordinary by virtue of owning one's identity. And how can we do that is the question that we're going to answer tonight. A poem is a creative message. And that sounds so small in a world of text messages and instant messages, but this world is run by messages of control. Billion-dollar industries and economic models are built on message. Here's a special story that I heard just the other day. I was at a Hispanic Panic, which is one of the series that are with Sangre Viva. Nivea Castro, I don't know if any of you guys are familiar, she's a poet and also an activist. She looked up her grandfather on one of these ancestry websites, you know, just for kicks. And what she found out is an example of the reason we need to know our family stories and what they reveal about us. Her grandfather, his name is Modesto Figueroa Denise, was listed on the United States Census initially at the turn of the century as white. Why was he listed as white? Does anybody know? Because when the U.S. government was selling the idea of colonizing Puerto Rico, they were saying it's because the citizens of Puerto Rico are white. 10 years later in the census, he became mulatto. 10 years after that, he became colored. And finally, you know what stamped on his World War II draft card? He's black, because it affects his position on the battlefield. And that's a deeply personal lesson to Nivea, to Modesto, of course, at the time, about Puerto Rican history in America, a forced message of identity made to fit political ends. And this is the kind of message that we've been seeking to correct for generations. And some of those generations have joined us tonight to talk about the mission of correcting. Our own stories go from ordinary to extraordinary with some analysis, fresh ideas on old perspectives, with talk amongst ourselves about who we present to the world. And so tonight, alongside our very special guests, Willie Perdomo and Sandra Maria Esteves, that are in the house. ¿Qué pasó? I want to be in on the bochinche. The Sangre Viva Arts Alliance, comprised of the most progressive and active Latino arts organizations in the city, and in all, we represent about, hundreds of New York City artists and poets. And in conjunction with the Center for Puerto Rican Studies, we are proud to present our first Sangre Viva conversation. Thank you for coming out tonight, and we're going to bring to the stage some of the Sangre Viva poets. Hello, hello. This one works too. You guys get a choice if you want to be kind of like exposed or if you want to be hidden. So I don't know, you guys tell me. And the first person I want to bring up here, she's a great friend, and she has a very interesting story in and of itself, and she always speaks about her personal legend. So I want her to come up to the stage. Give it up for Vanessa Martir, aka La Loba.
All right, so my name is Vanessa Martir. My name is La Loba, and actually this piece is the reason that I am La Loba. So I will just, I'll go right in. My wild seed arrived on the wind today, split up swiftly like fertilized egg nestled in uterus lining. She dug in her roots and blossomed. Dandelion, iris lily, poison tip rose, Venus flytrap for those who dare. Velvet petal violet for those who want more. Me llaman criatura salvaje, unharnessed, unrefined, uncontrolled, loose, disrespectful bad girl because I danced in the streets and scream when my throat itches. I will not be tamed. I will not be caged. I'm not a fucking horse or bison. You cannot toss a rope around my neck, drag, pull, whip until I acquiesce. I will not be yoked. Do not fuck with this wild woman. I run with wolves, howl at the moon even when she's not full, and she purrs back, croons her sister song, for she too is wild like me. Ella, la que sabe, she was the ocean before the tides pulled, the sky before she married herself to the earth, the stars before she made heaven their blanket. Ella, she takes a hold of me, pleads, grita la historia de la mujer libre, untethered and unbound. So these are the women I write for. The one enslaved in the brothel, the one flinching under a fist, the one whose hands are blistered and calloused from toiling the fields, the one who walks for miles to bring water to her son, the one who's been told for centuries that she's not good enough, subordinate, inferior, just a piece of Adam's rib. I write for her because at night, when all is silent and she is finally alone, she remembers and honors that wild woman, the one you hear, faint whispers in your ear that roar like dragon's breath, telling you, you got this, baby girl. Tu eres la loba. She lives on in you. Thank you.
Representing Brooklyn and Inwood. We also have the Bronx. The Bronx is in the building, and I see him in the back with a nice little tango. There's a series in the Bronx called The Babylonians. I want to bring up one of its founding members. Give it up for Taino Briggs.
The three ships broke my daily meditation. They appeared at the horizon like the silhouettes of death. The reeking stench of their foul intentions preceded their dock. I saw the snouts of the evil men walking out to our beaches, wet and dripping. Their backs hunched and decrepit, their hooves soiling the shores as they marched together inland. I need only read their beady pupils to know genocide was their agenda. So I grabbed my prince, awoke my queen, and armed with my dirtiest machete, we fled into the jungle, into the bosom of safety. I turned only once to see my village. Home, black with smoke, the acrid fumes of my burnt brothers and sisters choking us as we struggled up the hill. Footsteps like boulders smashed behind me. A foreign language erupted from behind their fangs. My queen cried out in anger, my son of fear. I pushed them ahead, they disappeared into the bush, and I said, remember, I lived. I turned to face the devil when from out of the shrubs they stalked, their sweat and stench sucking the oxygen out of the air. They stopped, sucking the oxygen out of the air. I leapt onto them, my cries to the sun so clear, mountainside, my plea for the world to remember me so futile it drained the ocean of salt, my tears filled with rage as I vowed to not stop. The first shot spun me around. I thrust my soul into their hairy, heaving chest, saliva splashed from between their ravenous teeth as I hacked with the force of 100 Tainos. The second shot ripped chunks of flesh from my leg. I leapt onto them. Their blood flew putrid and rotten as I hacked and chopped, calling out, remember the dead, the fallen, the queens, the kings, the mothers, the children, the tribes, the clans. The last shot stopped my world. My thoughts became clear. Remember the dead, remember the clans, remember the kings, remember the queens. I feel so numb. Remember.
And the Brig in the Bronx. I want to bring up a dear friend of mine who actually saw me at my first time at the New Rican Poets Cafe, and her first time happened to be at my series, Capicu Poetry. Give it up for Bernice Sosa Izquierdo.
Simplemente yo. I am the secret my parents kept from the ghetto, the Anne Frank of East New York. The around-the-way girl who learned about the streets by playing and not working them. I am summer skibbit crack vial rainbows and gunshot nights escaping to warm quebradilla sun, coquí serenades, and Oaxaca waves and coquí serenades. I am the descendant of an illiterate grandmother who shared our history daily. Mi abuelita querida, mi mamá, second mother, constantly schooling me on the true meaning of lo que es la vida. Lo que es no saber tener zapatos hasta los 14 años, comprado con dinero ahorrado, sembrando tabaco. Lo que es tener piso de tierra en vez de losa, casa de madera con techo de zinc en vez de cemento. Lo que es escuchar la melodía de una lluvita sobre del verano sobre ese mismo techo. Lo que es tomar café con una tapita de pan porque no hay más nada. Mezclando granita de arroz blanco con habichuelitas y lengua propia porque la mezcla realmente no aparece. Yo soy a descendant of Puerto Rican poverty right on our beloved island, 12 children desperately desiring, seeking dreams of Nueva York rescue, only to be used, abused, and left to be forgotten. Always loving, forgiving, despite the hands dealt. I am the product of first-generation Boricuas predominantly raised in Loisaida Alphabet City. Overprotected, loved beyond measure, guided skillfully because you can't F with street smarts. Provided with purple white torch number 2 pencils on all exams from grade school through high school until East New York went to NYU and copped 2 degrees. I am still the overly anxious, nerdy, extremely awkward, clumsy, introverted child who rode the cheese bus to and from that special program. I am the 8-year-old stylist poet still in training, still misunderstood, still encased in her own world, still refusing to grow up or to pass for something she's not. I am the Coke bottle, plastic colored frames wearing child behind contact lenses, and though I naturally can't see through these eyes, my third eye is definitely not blind and has yet to fail me. Never quite fitting in the hood, nor college, nor the island of my dreams, mi tierra querida, mi borinque preciosa, nor the U.S. Yo soy el sabor y aroma de alcapurrias rellena de papas y pana, pastelillo y mofongo de pollo, carne y camarón, arroz blanco con habichuelitas guisas y bistecs encebolladitos, pasteles en hoja pernil, arroz con gandules, batata y tostones con mojito. I am the New York City Puerto Rican Day Parade when it was still family friendly. Soy dulce como el flan, que nepas y pudín con pasita, about as refreshing as piraguas de tamarindo on a sweltering hot day, and about as warm as the leaves of our beloved fiery-hued flamboyant. I am the beholder of fire escape camping memories said to a Lavo, Señora Ponceña, Tito Puente, Eri Palmieri, Celia Cruz, Ola Fania, El Gran Combo, Menudo, The Doors, Hendrix, The Mamas and the Papas, The Who, Bob Marley, and the Beatles combined soundtrack. Soy aguinaldo navideño, bomba plena, barril, tambor, primo, güiro, G4, cowbells, y maracas. I am a spiritual being living a human experience. Soy a Taíno spirit with European wrapped carcass and an African soul. Soy simplemente yo.
By the way, congratulations on getting published in Letras. I know you got published recently. And our next poet was also published in Letras. Please give a warm welcome for Plena.
Hello, everyone. I choose the podium. How cool is it that we're here, and it's those that have paved the way and those that are starting to pave their own way. I think it's awesome. I like the word awesome. This is called When the New Age Comes. I hope to be resting on the bosom of Mama Africa. I pray for the waters to have mercy on my mother. May the first sight of the majestic wave aiming for her soul be enough for her to leap into the arms of God. Prepare to let go. Brace yourself for the truth. spoken directly from the lips of that yet to be discovered. Time is not linear. Reality is not limited to the external. We live on a rotating planet that coughs, sneezes, and curses up storms. Cycles are all around us for weather, procreation, harvesting, and consciousness. Only fools believe that things are constant and permanent. Only the naive don't realize the universe is still expanding. The sun has been ordered to move, and so by law, we must shift. Our thinking, our intentions, our focus, our existence, your eyes and souls have been anointed. What you do with this new knowledge will determine your outcome. The new age will come like a thief in the night. Pray. Enjoy life. Appreciate anything worth admiring. Soak it all in. Don't let material possessions weigh you down. And always remember, trust your instinct before the words of any man or government. I now refuse to bring a child into this world until the clouds of ash settle, until it's determined that life can be sustained with the basic necessities provided by our land, not by technology. We've become accustomed and complacent with our above capacity modern bubble. We've evolved out of communion with the sun, moon, stars, and planets, and have forgotten what it's like to decipher the language of existence. We call it chance, coincidence, or an incident, an anomaly. God bless what's left of the earth when the new age comes.
Roberto Plena Everzari. So that will conclude this portion. So what I want to do is turn it over to my fellow poet. Everybody, please give a warm welcome to Pedro López Adorno.
Welcome. Buenas noches. Bienvenidos. On behalf of the African and Puerto Rican Latino Studies Department that I belong to, and on behalf of the Centro de Estudios Puertorriqueños, both of them co-sponsor of this great event, this inaugural event that we hope will continue over the next, months and years. I'm very pleased and very honored to be here to celebrate this event. And I'm also very happy to see very old friends of mine, people that I've known for a long time that I care to remember. Obviously, Sandra Maria Esteves is here in front of me. And one of the people that I initially contacted when I was working on an anthology called Papiros de Babel, which was published way, way back. This year marks the 20th anniversary of that anthology. I have it here in front of me, and that's why I bought it. Papiros de Babel, in case you don't know about this particular anthology. I also brought a more recent anthology by another dear friend of mine, a person deeply committed to Puerto Rican and Caribbean literature, has been throughout his life, Roberto Marquez, who published in 2007 this beautiful anthology called Puerto Rican Poetry, an anthology from Aboriginal to contemporary times. And in it, he did most of the translations, not all of them, but most of them. And what he did there is very important to this whole intergenerational conversation. What I did in '91 is also important in terms of that intergenerational, transnational conversation that some people initially opposed in the late '80s. Why are you going to include some New Yorican poets, for example? And of course, I always believed, perhaps because although I was born in Puerto Rico, I grew up in New York. I grew up in the Bronx, in a place called Franklin Avenue. So, and that was way back in 1965, right? That's when I came here. So I always believed that Puerto Rican literature on both sides of the border, right, are obviously part of just one common history of struggle. And therefore, they belong in the so-called or miscalled Puerto Rican literary canon, whether they include us or not, is irrelevant. We're obviously part of Puerto Rican culture, Puerto Rican literature, Puerto Rican history, society, etc. As I was coming here with my son who's in the back, his name Pedro López, just like mine, of course, I was thinking that, you know, the intergenerational conversation that we're talking about today and that we're going to have today is something that has been going on for a long, long time. I'm thinking, of course, of, you know, those initial Puerto Rican revolutionary leaders of the early to late 1890s that came here to the city and had conversations that in one way or other have a lot to do with poetry, with society, with history, with struggle. And I'm thinking of people, both Cuban and Puerto Rican, that got together in apartments, in other locations throughout this city, in the 1890s, you know, to talk about independence, to talk about poetry. I'm thinking of Lola Rodriguez de Tio, who was here. You know, I'm thinking of Francisco Gonzalo Marin, that great revolutionary poet. I'm thinking of that black Puerto Rican, Antillean Negro Puerto Rican, born of a West Indian mother and a Dutch father, Arturo Alfonso Schomburg, okay, who did many, many wonderful things in this country, in this city. I'm thinking, of course, of Jose Martí. So, of course, the intergenerational conversations have been going on. And these anthologies, as well as other anthologies, and of course, the alliances that people here are creating as we speak, you know, Sangre Viva, Capicu, you know, all the organizations that are going on right now, I think are part of that tradition that in part, one of the major strategies that we have used has been to, if we're poets, is to include ourselves or try to include the work of our people in anthologies, because anthologies are intergenerational conversations. You know, if you look at it carefully, you know, when I look at anthology, I say, wow, you know, look what this individual has to show me today about, you know, revolutionary poetry, for example, or a poet that likes to work with language. Well, I have it there, and I can have a conversation with him or her, right? So by the same token, you know, I was committed through something that the Centro, you know, I thank the Centro for this, asked me to do last year, which was to initiate an online magazine that we call Letras, and now we are in the second issue, and the second issue is about to come out with, in fact, some of the members of some people that are here, you know, like Bomba Rose, Rich Villar, Bernice, you know, Cristina, Bonafide, who's in the back. So there are a number. Oh, Teresa. Sí, Teresa Becerril. So definitely is really a moment for celebration. You know, there's so many, you know, wrong things going on out there, but poetry lives on and will always live on, and we live through it. And let's get on with the conversation.
Thank you, Pedro López Adorno. I had, and I want to get you guys feeling for this. I had on my itinerary that we would have some poetry from the panelists themselves, so that you guys can get a taste of their background and what they're bringing to the conversation. Well, you guys want to hear that? Or you guys want to go straight into the conversation? Because in the conversation, you guys are going to get to ask questions. I'm actually, if we can, going to move this mic over to the front, and we're going to do sort of a, what do they call it when they, not an open house.
Open mic?
It's a Q&A, but it's a, the words, se me acabó la palabra. But we're going to do that, okay? We're going to do a little Q&A. You know what I mean. So, okay, so I think that we're ready for some poetry.
Yes.
All right?
Sounds good. Okay, sounds good.
So that being the case, of our conversation today, I have to initiate the newbie. Please give a warm welcome to Johnny Bomba Rose.
Hola, thank you all for coming. It's great to see everyone, friends and family, and the people that are my joy, that I live with, that I learn with, that I grow with. I just want to thank Rosalie Roman for everything she's done to put this together and to bring us together. And that's the idea behind Sangre Viva. We have all these different organizations that are doing similar things with their own specific flavor and their own specific angle that they're tending to. And together, by bringing us together, we're just making a more powerful alliance. And I actually, one of the goals behind Sangre Viva is to get all these poets that are reading their work all over the city into an anthology, because we're the lifeblood of our culture and our community, and we're telling our stories. And that's going to keep our history alive. It's going to keep us going. And teach our children who we are, because, you know, the TVs and the movies and the music and the things that are going on today, they're American. This is how we maintain our Puerto Ricanness in New York City. This piece is called Apartment 8H, 50 Paladino. En el barrio. Mornings smelled like farina and fried eggs. Spilled over the edge of the plate one time, and Theo got to play Boy Scout with my blisters, popped them with a pin, ointmented them, and covered the boo-boo gently with a curita. Or maybe she just put some pasta on it. I remember both happening. It smelled like pit bulls in his room and green menta alcohol in hers. Thick, chalky white toothpaste that stuck to the sides of the sink, and her favorite maja soap in the bathroom. It looked like sunshine, dust beams, and chain link fences, and playgrounds, and basketball and handball courts, and buildings as far as the eye could see. The Empire State Building from the sala, and Taino Towers from the bedroom windows. Dolls, push toys, and punching balloons for the cousins to hit instead of hitting each other, and translucent circle chips and colorful ink markers for bingo. It looked like Rosie house dress with pearly oyster buttons and round soft belly to hug and rest upon while sitting on the sofa after breakfast. It felt like thin sheets de la tercera and thick foam pillows, the harder the better. Curious fingers run carefully over the guayo. Cool window on warm cheek, drawing hearts on moist glass, and little fingernails dragged over the guido. Pañitos con pledge to rub the coffee table shiny, and sobitos de Vicks and agua florida y besitos, and aching giggly tummies, and bites from my abuela porque ella no quiere carne de aquí, ni de aquí, ni de aquí. It felt like unconditional love doled out by a powerful heart. It sounded like The Price is Right, sweeping floors with no dustpan, and 2 playing cards that had been swept up would do, and dirty red Heart Queen and dusty black Spady Jack, and the clack clack of the door knocker, on the other side of which was always, who? And we were usually pretty happy to see them. Soft, warm, pale pink, nearly flat chancletas shuffled. It sounded like jibarito tunes about sisters in manicomios, claves and cuatros, salsa y merengues any time of the day. And there was always laughter, and I loved you. It tasted like aceitunas out of the jar, tocinas, pastelillos, and bacalaitos, and stacks of export soda crackers dunked in sweet café con leche, chunks of welfare cheese and pasta de guayaba, arroz con dulce, arroz con gandules, arroz con pollo, arroz con orejita, y mi favorito, arroz con leche. Se quiere casar con una viudita de la capital. It tasted like forever.
Johnny's a very special person. She's a connector for this Sangre Viva thing. She's in every single poetry house in New York City. Whether it's Latino or not, she's always there with a flower in her hair and a smile on her face and doing her thing. So thank you, Johnny, for helping us put this together. The next poet I want to call to the stage, we affectionately have called him El Profe for years, even though he may be younger than a lot of people in this room. Give it up for Rich Villar.
Bombi plena in the front row. Okay, so man, this is a room full of Latins, man. I love it. All right. So Yacentos Collective has been around in various incarnations for the last 8 years. We brought poetry to the South Bronx in a time when no one wanted anything in the South Bronx except burnt out buildings and heartache and despair. And we brought a collective of Latino poets of all nationalities from all around the nation. And that's kind of where our outlook is to, unite Latinos in the same fashion, and I think in the same inspiration as the Chicano movement and the New Yorican movement did back in the day. That's kind of where our aim is toward now. Obviously, the mosaic has broadened, and it has got all kinds of different paints to it, different tiles to it. But we hope that at the end of the day, it brings together something wonderful. And I think this is a good start, this Sangre Viva collective. So I'm going to read 2 poems really quickly, if I may. I'm really humbled to be here. Amazing. This one's called Always Here. Lacking a proper entrance into a poem about Arizona Senate Bill 1070 prompts me instead to tell you about the flamboyanes blooming in Doña Yeya's mouth every time she speaks about her children, or the pasteles that do not wrap themselves until blood is offered to the masa, or the boy she sent to Germany who came back headless and quoting Bible verses, or the girls with 13 years of bruises at the hands of those same boys who were told así es la vida without the slightest sense of irony, who shoulder New Yorican babies dutifully to Bayamón, dreaming about a nation under which they cannot legally claim citizenship, or parrandas of gold stomping flat the Jersey snow, forgetting that coquito never meant cold weather, or the act of forgetting beneath every aguinaldo, because civil cafecito and politics cannot coexist. And we do not question our birth certificates unless we are agents of Homeland Security, because we were born American citizens and as such are eligible to die at a higher rate in exchange for houses in Orlando that we do not own. There are Puerto Ricans in Arizona and New York and Nebraska, and I promise you, good gente, it makes no difference if your grandmother conjures Michoacán or Mayagüez in her flowered breath. It makes no difference if you bless the 4 winds or pray to San Juan Bautista. To those who only see papers in brown flesh, who cannot locate your cities on the maps of conquerors or conquered, you are a threat. And if this is the case, gente, I say, be a threat. Unquieted. Bloom where you are not permitted to bloom. Disjointed, walk anywhere you please. Stumble if you must, but be present. When they ask you where you keep your company, tell them here, here, always here. Okay, so in my ongoing quest to reconcile my poetry with academia, I figured I would bring this particular poem to El Centro de Estudios Puertorriqueños. This is called Puerto Rican Studies. It's not that bad. Everybody calm down. Junior went to Vietnam and came home wearing someone else's head. Our brother Johnny and I convinced ourselves that what he needed was Marisol and Hector Lavoe, followed by salchicha con huevo in the morning. The line at the cheetah was longer than heartbreak, 24 degrees and dropping fast, but Marisol's dress was gritted teeth and purple goddamn, so we stayed. A cow on the bridge made Hector late again, but who gives a shit with a voice like that? El cantante nodding to claves only he can hear. And Junior keeping pace in his head the same way he kept pace with Cortijo at Doña Yeya's house, banging his lollipop fingers on the peanut butter jar. Junior played cuatro back then, soft and sacred, fast and slow, switching between cartoon jingles and estas son las trullas que te ofrecí, con tradicionales de nuestro país. That's real old. We had another brother named Albizu, Albi for short, who died while Junior was in country. Then his boy Manny stepped on a landmine and Junior refused to see more. At the dinner table, fists to his sides, eyes fixed into years from now, he would eat and speak and rub his temples asking about Albie. We answered one day, Albie's dead, Junior. Car accident. You remember? He nodded his head, took down the cuatro from the hall closet and started playing an aguinaldo, Soñando Despierto. The cheetah was Johnny's idea. Maybe he needs to get back into the music, and we agreed. And here was Junito plucking 6 strings in suddenly taut air, lips pursed in concentration. Marisol and her purple dress ended up dancing with me. Johnny held up the wall, whispering bendiciones for our brother perched below the bandstand. We sang out Hector's third Lelolai, and when we hit the diner at 5 a.m., our laughter above the table was a soft rain on the backs of our necks. Junque kiss in the South Bronx. No questions asked when Junior laid out his life in swiftly plucked notes, troubling the air with his smile. No smile, no air could bear him back up when he crossed himself that same night and disappeared over the side of 305. We asked ourselves why and why. And under the watch of our mother's gray skies, we grew another headstone for St. Raymond's. Quiero morir por mi país, says Junior's oldest boy. I can't go out like Pops did. I want my name, my free will bound to granite forever. True Boricua style. Watch. I'ma get that flag tattoo on my shoulder. Put Papi's name, birth and death days. Nice tributo, tú sabes. Right before basic, I'ma get it done. The boy is 18 years old, contemplating death from the backseat of his uncle's SUV, about to graduate high school in New Jersey. Or maybe I can major in Puerto Rican studies. I figure the Army's better since I already know everything I need to know about Puerto Ricans. Thank you, guys.
Rich, that is an amazing hat.
Oh, thank you. Touring, baby. Yeah, love it.
Okay, so I know that our very special guest, their time is wealth. So I want to ask them to come up and please bless us with one piece of their own choosing, because I'm open to hear anything they got to say, and I'm sure you guys are too. ¿Puedo oír? You guys gonna hear me? There's no feedback or anything like that? Give it up, please, for the award-winning poet, author, founder of Cipher Books, and literary mastermind, Willie Perdomo.
So, yeah, I want to read a quick a poem by another poet, and then I'll read something that I wrote recently. And this poet's name was Marcos Fres, and he came out of the University of Puerto Rico at Rio Piedra. And right now they're celebrating the 50th anniversary of a magazine called Guajana in Puerto Rico. And he wrote this poem called Vital Poetics that I want to share with you. Suspend the song. Live by vital verse. For once, listen to me. Speak without trope. The heart doesn't melt. It stops in horror and from death, or breaks from wars and weeping. Listen. That first of all. Then unleash your tongue, your fist, if necessary. Suspend song, please, and speak normally or hardly at all. And to me too, though I'm already on the blacklist, and the red of those loving peace, bread, freedom for all, for those of us changing the world with a few swift kicks of light, with words of flesh and bone to the daily dog of our own death whenever someone falls in vain. I was on a panel, and I remember this. I remember the subject of Saisa came up, and so of course, when the subject of Saisa came up, there was one person who was indignant, I think, about people kind of using Saisa as a barometer for Puerto Rican culture. And somehow, at that point, I remembered that what Saisa kind of meant to me. And one of the things that happens, I think, in our culture is that it's so fractured that the number of nationalistic movements within one culture is amazing. So you have your linguistic nationalists, you have your cultural nationalists, You have your neo-nationalists, and now I introduce into the fold the Fania nationalists. And I'm creating a definition as I go for that. So this is excerpt from the Fania nationalist. Yeah. 1. Cheo Feliciano could croon a badge off a detective and inspire dreams of cold beers late into study hours. Subway thoughts such as these lunch poems can get sidetracked on the third rail. If you wanted to argue who played the best Rankankan with the quickness, I would say the Sesta All-Stars. Now when I say Sesta, you say All-Stars. Sesta All-Stars. It's been proven that if everyone who's selling you something sees you writing, they'll leave you alone. How's that for some Rankankan? Now, 2. Why we keep pointing to the Maelos, the Celias, the Picolins, the Canarios? Because it's the only time that the repeating island found her keys. I can hear Jose right now yelling, throw down the key, spinner, spinner, spinner. Ariel, youth poet in my class, said he got rid of his living room two-step by looking at YouTube clips, and now he's a pro who has read The Diary of a Madman for the people who don't listen, don't hear, and won't see. Translate that into Spanish, and you'll get your first lesson in Fania nationalism. 3. Quelillo, Quilombo, it's not that we had 2 left feet. We were always running. If I had to smuggle a poem out of Egypt, it would contain code and clave. When I hear the word Kokolo, it's not Junebug, Tamale, or Rerun that I see. It's Ponce Playa singers falling off the palms. Buckets plugged with beats. Just look at the dance on the platform. There's your institution. A night to remember, live. It was all on the corner. The Grant of Heaven by Block Party. Go, put on your shoes, support your local scene. Thank you.
Willie Perdomo. Willie P. She is an author, a poet, a visual artist, and a founding member of the New Rican movement. Give it up for La Madrina, Sandra Maria Esteves.
Yeah, this is good. Familia. It's nice to be here. I don't care that it's raining outside. It's not raining in here. The sun is shining. I'm a spiritual person, and I'm a dreamer. And I believe that it's important to imagine the world that we would like to have, or would like to see, or would like to become. Because if we can't imagine it, then how can we ever get there? Take some dreams. I look out my window and dream, cosmic searching, soul-lifting dreams. Amina Baraka freedom people dreams. Lolita independent struggle dreams. Julia de Burgos humanidad poema dreams. Don Pedro Albizu Campos el pueblo se levanta dreams. Betances creando pueblo dreams. Jorge Brandon Coco hablando dreams. Miguel Algarín, Body B lenguaje dreams. Flaco Navaja, Guanile cantando dreams. Mariposa, Puerto Rico nació en mi dreams. So many dreams. I even have some for you. Here, take some dreams. Got more than I need. Dream you a dream. Dream yourself into it. Dream it. See it. Then be it. Dream of becoming empowered on a two-way street, motivated by the right to self-determine your form of happiness. Dream to climb out of the pit. Dream to sprout wings and take flight. Dream to soar into the heights. Dream to become who you are meant to be. Dream to become, commune into community. Dream for everybody, for me and you. Here, take some dreams. Dream Latina woman empowerment dreams. Nakawe and Urayoana healing circle dreams. Evelina Antonetti nation building dreams. Antonia Pantoja aspirando dreams. Miriam Colón traveling teatro dreams. Esperanza Martel free the political prisoner dreams. Rising out of darkness and walking in light. Weaving different songs that bring order to strife. A woman's creation dream, a womb dream submerged deep in the water. A finding and naming dream, identifying the threads of our past that form us into wholeness, that articulate ancestral treasures. Though these dreams be female and whole, round and full, moist and nurturing, affectionate and tender, these are dreams for everybody who need a dream to find them, to fight for their being, validate their existence, affirm their purpose. A dream to walk you into being, to guide you into the gentle whirlwind within, a tall ship through the full moon's light. Dream for all who have forgotten how to dream, who wander dreamless, sing incoherent incantations. Dream for who cannot dream, for a world united in its wildness, a balanced front of humanity where all are fed no matter how different, a coming together for peace. Dream new visions for love. Here, take some dreams.
We were all dreaming right there. We were dreaming out loud. I felt that. Do you guys feel that? All right, I think we're about ready to get into our conversational piece. So, can I have my panelists make their way towards the stage? I don't know. Can we have some setup music? What do we have? A little salsa? Somebody do a beatbox? No? Okay. Actually, Rich, man, you touched on the SB 1070, and I know that I marched with Grito de Poeta last year, against the SB 1070, and you actually had you were a co-presenter of the Floricanto, right, in Washington, D.C.? And you had a road trip with some of the poets in attendance here.
That's correct.
And I want to ask you a question. I didn't see a lot of Puerto Ricans represented on my end. I don't know if you saw it on your end. And what could we do to kind of foster that Latino solidarity, in your opinion?
Well, that's a very large question to start with. How do I foster Latino solidarity? Well, I think the fact that my mother had to go get a new birth certificate is a big way to sort of remember that, for some people we're not American enough, and for others we're not Puerto Rican enough. And that's the same story no matter, what your color, no matter what shade of brown you happen to be. So in those instances where language is a common factor, I think that can, I think that's a good thing to bring people together. I think shared oppressions, shared culture. I don't know, sometimes the best way to do it is just, you know, say that you're going to have an event and people will show. I mean, that's kind of what, you know, that's kind of what we did in Washington. We said, well, you know, we want to bring as many different kinds of people together. And it wasn't limited to even just Latinos. There were all kinds of people that were represented, from Native American to African American to Asian American, Latino. We had one poet of Hmong descent who read with us, and it was this wonderful thing. And around the SB 1070 issue, if you do like Malcolm X did, and you take it to the next step of saying this is a human rights issue, it goes beyond nation and it goes beyond race, then people will join up. And that was the great thing that we had down in DC. And I think that can be done not just you know, for Latinos, but for everybody.
That's a wonderful answer. And I think it seems to me that the arts community is more open to fostering these relationships. And my question, and this is to you guys, the OGs of our ilk. The OGs, the elders, like the, you know, the experienced, like the what? No.
G is a term of affection that means that you are of elder status.
Right. Oh, see, look, mira, I'm teaching too. We're all teaching here today. This is great. So, I mean, you know what? This is a good question to ask, and this is for the both of you for different reasons. Sandra, I know that you are, of course, you're half Dominican as well. I should say you are Dominican. You are Puerto Rican and you are Dominican. Now, and you are one of the founding members from the very beginning of the New Rican movement that we know, with the cafe with Miguel. How did you navigate? I mean, did that present some kind of issue at that time, that it was a New Rican, but you know, you were half Dominican? I mean, only because we know that there's a historical beef, so to speak, between the Puerto Rican and the Dominicans in New York City.
So, all right. Let me see. What's the first part of the question? Is being Puerto Rican Dominican?
Right. Was it a factor?
Dominican, New Rican.
Right.
You know, because I'm born and raised in the Bronx, and and I started out Spanish dominant, and somewhere along the way became English dominant through the process of boarding school and the nuns. You know, so which presented, you know, a whole bunch of issues all by itself. I didn't start writing till college, till the age of some folks here, maybe. And had not considered poetry, all right? One of the things, before the New Rican Poets Cafe came into existence, which was around 1974, más o menos, there was a whole community of poetry, of poets, of Latino poets, Puerto Rican poets, New Rican poets, although maybe nobody actually said, okay, New Rican, nobody put a name on it. We were Puerto Rican, but then we weren't, because the Puerto Rican community was like, well, they're from New York and they write in English, and, you know, they're not Puerto Rican, not for real. You know, so there was a whole academic controversy as to whether we were actually authentically Puerto Rican. And, you know, there's some validity to that, in the sense that, yeah, we don't write in Spanish, we're born here, we're raised here, don't even know or understand the dynamic on the island, which is very different than the dynamic here, right? So, but by the same token, this is the land of our ancestors, and, you know, we are not to be denied our history and our culture. And even though we were born here, our raíces, our cultural landmarks, our identities, they're here with us. They came across the ocean here with us, you know. So, you know, I grew up listening to Bomba en Plena, but I didn't know, I couldn't tell you that's Bomba en Plena. I grew up eating rice and beans every day. I love rice and beans, still love rice and beans. I could eat rice and beans every single day and not get tired. And I know how to make pasteles, because I used to make pasteles with my titi Julia, you know, y guayar las cosas y todo. So, So for someone to say that I'm not Puerto Rican, well, to me that's even absurd to even suggest it. But, there are some purists around, and if you're not exactly 100% of something, then you can't be that. So which brings up the other issue that I'm half Dominican. I grew up identifying with my Puerto Rican side because I grew up around my Puerto Rican family. My mother's Dominican, but she came here when she was 16 and never went back and was here alone by herself and was isolated from the rest of her family. What brought her here, I'm not sure. I have my suspicions, but it was not long after Trujillo took power, and my grandfather was killed in the, let me put it this way, my grandfather died in the cane fields under mysterious circumstances. So, my mother doesn't have the whole story, but I have my suspicions, and this is based on information I only recently, in recent years, have become aware about, because I didn't know anything about my Dominican history. In fact, I grew up not knowing anything about my Puerto Rican history. It wasn't until I got older, till I got in college, that then I had to go on a search and find mission to make those discoveries, because it was not brought to me in school. There was no Centro for Puerto Rican Studies, when I was in college. When I was in college, I was one of 3 Latinos. There was me and my friend, and we used to sit in the lunchroom to try to identify the 3rd Latino.
That was the game.
It was that serious. Yeah, it was that serious, So that's one part of your question. Now, when I come into the poetry scene, I met everybody. I met Pedro and Papoleto, and Papoleto was the one who brought me into the community, Jesus Papoleto Melendez, and through him I met everybody else, including Jose Angel Figueroa, Miguel Piñero. Okay, so then, then along comes Miguel Algarin, and he says, wow, this is really dynamic, this is great, let's market this. And along comes the New Rican Poets Cafe. And I thought it was a great idea because it kind of reminded me of the French salons of the Impressionists, and it reminded me of the Ateneo Puertorriqueño, where there was an ongoing dialogue of intellectuals who were exploring just the creative possibilities of life, of the universe, of the existence of everything. And I said, well, that's great. And what I liked about the cafe, it wasn't, even though it was called the New Rican Poets Cafe, it wasn't limited to New Yorkers. It was open to anybody who had something to say. And if you didn't have something to say that was worthy of being said, you got booed, you got talked at, people tell you shut the up, and I tell people don't throw tomatoes because I will throw them back, and it was like that, but that was very healthy. I thought that was wonderful. On the other side, though, it was also enlightening because I became aware of how entrenched in the sexism and machismo my male counterparts, I'll say, were, some still are. Things have changed a little bit from here to here, I want to see gender equality completely. I won't be satisfied at least until I see that. And in the process, I experienced some very humiliating experiences. I don't want to get into the details because they're really gory. Some really nasty stuff that went down. And younger poets don't know about this because nobody's put it in writing, because nobody wants to put that in writing. We want to look at what is good and beautiful and great about us and strive for better things. But I have stories to tell, and Well, I won't tell them right now, but I do, you know, I have ongoing memoirs, and I'm trying to recall and recollect all things. But I'll give you one story, just to give you an example. Okay. One day, Joseph Papp wanted to feature the New Yorican poets because the New Yorican poets are becoming hot. And so he invites the New Yoricans from the cafe, which is Miguel Algarín, Miguel Piñero, Lucky Cienfuegos. And then so they were the New Yoricans. And then he invites Pedro, and Pedro is, so it's Pedro Pietri, Dr. Willie Pietri, and Jesus Papoleto Melendez, and they're the Latin Insomniacs motorcycle club poets. And so each camp, you could say, put out their own publicity with their photos excluding the others. You know. And I was also invited. Nobody included me in any of their publicity, nor did my name appear anywhere. And it was a beautiful event that took place in Delacorte Theater, Central Park. Beautiful theater, you know, you go in, the sun is up and it goes down, the evening progresses, very lovely by the lake. And it's like, you know, the battle of the gallos, these New Yoricans and those New Yoricans, you know. And then there I am, and nobody knew I was even going to be there, you know. And so that's just one little example of some of the things that went on that to me were unacceptable.
Right. I was wondering about the gender dynamic, especially at that time, because you were one of the only few women involved in the movement at that time. I want to open it up to the floor. Does anybody have a question for Sandra? Come up to the mic, and then we're going to move over to Mr. Perdomo for a question.
Come up to the mic. No, because I'm going to be very, it may not settle well with everyone. I have a question. You said something about... It doesn't make any sense.
You can't hear you. There's no point in asking if nobody
What was your original question? The question that you asked.
The original question?
Yes.
Was about being one of the only women involved with the New Yorican Poets Cafe?
The next one.
Was the fact that she was Dominican?
No. Okay, let me address this. Here's the thing. You said something about how do we I'm paraphrasing, keep our culture together. Well, first of all, you have to stop seeing yourself through the eyes of your captors. Most of us in this room are either Indian, African. We're taking on these terms that these people gave to us, and we're running with them. And liberation, if you're going to liberate yourself, it means to get totally away from them. And, which doesn't mean that you cannot love them or whoever they are, these people are. Doesn't mean that you can't love them, doesn't mean that you can't deal with them in a respectful manner, but it does mean that you have to carve out something of yourself. Are we Hispanic or are we Latino? What is it? It's just like, my mother is from North Carolina. My father is from Dominican Republic. I'm a black man. When I see you, you look like my cousin. So, I mean, where are we going? Where do we...
Well, when initially I talked about messages, right?
Hold
and
on.
I said the message... Do you have a question?
Let me finish.
Okay, get your question out.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay.
But the brother said black Puerto Rican. And I'm trying to figure out what the hell that is. You know what I'm saying? Like, what the hell is a black Puerto Rican? Because we never say white Puerto Rican.
Actually, people
Actually,
say that.
Well, we do. But you know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
You know what I'm saying,
People say that plenty.
But nobody, we don't say it amongst ourselves. We don't say that. We don't even say all of that other stuff. We don't even say most of that stuff. Because most of the people in our household, that's my cousin and I'm his cousin, and you know, we don't even talk like that.
No, I definitely understand what you're saying, but you're preaching to the converted. Because my whole point is that we control our message.
Yes.
You know, there's a message that's imposed on us, and then it's the way we process the message and what's our message back into the universe. That's what this panel is about. So this whole thing is about the creation story of the Nuyorican agenda, the civil rights agenda, and things like that. So I definitely take your point, but that's what we're addressing here with this panel today.
Right. But when do we stop with the terminology?
Well,
that's a discussion for another
day. Yeah, it is.
I just want to.
Yeah.
I'm never in these type of forums, so you know.
Yeah. No, I understand, but the reason that this forum exists is so that we can use the terminology amongst ourselves and hammer it out and figure it out. That's why we're here today.
No, poetry has nothing to do with it. Poetry is the art form.
Okay.
No, it doesn't. No, it has. Well, no, it doesn't. But I won't go.
Okay, I gotta go.
Yeah.
But thank you.
Blog about it. Do your thing.
By the way, guys, if you guys are blogging or what's the word, tweeting? Live tweeting, hashtag Sangre Viva Convo, or you're blogging with the Sangre Viva Convo tag, okay? I know you guys are doing that. I saw the phones. So, and I want to read what everybody's saying. So the next question is for Willie Perdomo. Now let's get to the creation stories. I want you to talk about. I know you've addressed it many times in interviews, but a lot of these young faces have never heard this story. The fight in junior high that with the white boy that led to Ed Randolph and the poem about the Vietnam War that changed, that made you redirect your energies.
Okay. Let me begin by, I think, saying that the process of identity formation is rich with the kind of chaos you just experienced just now. And on both ends of the island, what we have in common in that respect is chaos, right? So the work is almost an attempt to get to the bottom of that chaos. The one thing I really noticed about the whole, you know, Afro, Boricua, Black, Puerto Rican thing is that early on, what I noticed was that East Harlem had the highest concentration of housing projects. And in those housing projects were mostly Black and Puerto Rican people who lived there. At that point, what you really have in common is poverty more than anything else. And that's where I really saw a bridge that we could gap. But, you know, we can write it off as a kind of postmodern dynamic that this experience is totally discontinuous. It's fractured. And these kind of events go a long way toward trying to have that kind of conversation. Now, as far as the process of creation, I think that most of the writing for me that started kind of led up to that one moment, because in a way, I had been silenced into confusion. I have been silenced into rage. I have been silenced. Imagine me, and some of you grew up during the late 80s. There was no more a violent era than there was in the late 80s. That was catalyzed and gassed up by narcotics, right? So you talk about chaos and trying to kind of form an identity in that chaos. If you imagine the soundscape of a young man or girl living in East Harlem on a summer night in the late 80s, forget it. Train tracks, police sirens, songs, all of it, they come into your consciousness or unconsciousness, and you try to kind of formulate some sort of vision from that. What happened to me was that I got lucky in a sense that I was spotted by one of those teachers that said, maybe you should apply to a private school. That means that she was a great teacher, right? So, and at her vision, I said, okay, so now here you have this dynamic of me who really doesn't have that kind of street persona that the poems might imply, because you never want to confuse the writer with those poems, right? So now I carry all that bravado that I learned on Lexington Avenue to, ironically enough, a Quaker school, which is a nonviolent pacifist community, and it's service-oriented. So here we have a mentor who is sitting there. He's Black, by the way, and he's a poet. And so he says, he's been observing me for quite some time, And the thing about this story, Papo, is that really, if I dig down deep enough into that core of truth, that I was complicit in that story. In other words, I probably called him a white boy asshole when he called me a Puerto Rican bastard. Yeah? Okay. So when you call me a Puerto Rican bastard, basically all that, like, you know, pent up punk that I had inside me pretty much came out on him. And he caught it. He caught all my rage, he caught all my confusion, he caught all my anger that I had at my dad breaking out, he caught all of my sense of code, he caught all of my sense of machista, he caught all my sense of violence as the great equalizer, I think, at that moment. And I beat this kid from the 3rd floor corridor all the way down to the lobby. Now I understand why so many of our jails are filled with black and Puerto Rican men. This is what I realized finally and ultimately about that kind of violence that goes unrestrained, right? So then Ed grabs me and Ed says simply, and he wasn't really talking about poetry. And of course, this is a great story to kind of talk about how you became a poet, you know what I mean? But I think it led up to that very moment, a whole bunch of other things that, you know, we can talk about or relate at some other point. But in this moment specifically, I think what happened was that there it was, here I am, a dude without a dad, having an older man saying, yo, check yourself. Why? Well, because if you don't, one, you're going to lose your scholarship. So now, at this point, consequential thinking is handed down to me by an elder. Secondly, he says, well, this is what you have to do is you have to kind of learn how to reroute that energy. Now, I'm in 8th grade, man. I can't think in terms of abstractions like positive and negative flows of energy. I don't know what that means, right? Either I want to kiss a girl or throw a basketball, basically, right? Now, so what happens is, I'm crying through this whole moment. I cannot believe that this is how I'm expressing myself. And why can't I express myself, more importantly, in the terrain of Lexington Avenue in this way? He caught it. So then, 2 weeks later, Ed reads a poem during an assembly. And I kid you not, I was in this meeting house, and there were at least 200 some odd people in the assembly, because it was an upper school assembly. And I'm feeling like I'm the only person in the room because Ed is reading the poem for me. I start to cry. I don't understand why I'm crying, though. I don't. And he reads this poem that takes place in 2 seasons. The first season is spring, which of course is symbolic with growth. His boys are playing basketball, they drinking wine, they talking to girls. I mean, he sets up this beautiful summer scene that I know this well, even in my 8th grade frame. The winter, his friend goes off to a Vietnam War, comes back mentally unstable, to the point where if he heard a helicopter, he would run under a bench. I start crying. Why? I don't know. Because somehow I think my friends are going to meet the same kind of fate. For the first time, I'm hearing poetry in a way that I didn't know was poetry. And Ed broke it down. And at that moment, I made the connection to say, that's what he means by doing something else with your energy. Write some poems. So at that point, I became a poet. And I called myself a poet.
I want to open up to the floor for Willie. Does anybody have a question? Just please step up. Taino?
Mira, Papa, I sent Nicaraguan blues like to everybody I know. I swear. Because, you know, my mother's dark and my father's light. And when we first moved to Westchester, and my first day of school, my dad, you know, used to work for Freeman Furniture in the Bronx. And the first day of school, he had a suit on, and my mom had her Santurce garb on and chancletas. And they looked at my mom like she was the maid. And my father tore the place apart. And when you came out with the Nigga Rican Blues, what did you have on your mind when, you know, when you first wrote that? Because, man, like I said, I sent it to all my family, bro.
Yo, what happened was, I was in college, right? And my sense, again, of identity formation had a lot to do with what... Oh, I'm sorry. My sense of identity formation had a lot to do with what I was reading at the time, yeah? But also, I had undergone these kind of processes of acculturation at this private school first, then college, where I hung out with mostly the black people here, right? So one day I came out of a dorm, man, and this sister, Tanya, she said, "Willie, what's up, my Nigga Rican brother?" I said, "Oh, man, she thinks I'm black, yo," right? So then I started writing this piece, and I started coming up with all these images, and the one that came to me first was coming out of a barbershop, and my boy Larry said, "Yo, you look like a black dude, yo," you know, because I had my shape up and all that, when I had hair, of course, right? So I had my shape up and all that, and at that point, I started to notice that, oh, okay, I see what's going on here, and guess what I was remixing at that time? That moment that Perry Thomas had with Brew down south, when he said, "Yo, you a black man," and Perry was like, "Where? I am?" And he was like, "Oh shit, I am. I can't believe this," you know? And that kind of realization, I think, came to me. And that's how that kind of poem was born. And, you know, I don't read that poem anymore, but I see the relevance of it, because the amount of biracial children that you have in this country right now is up about 30 to 40%. So you read that poem anyway, like, yo, I can relate to that, you know what I'm saying? Because I'm like one and the other at the same time, you know? And I think it was also an attempt to bridge the gap between that divisiveness that I started seeing in our cultures. Not only on a black and Puerto Rican end, but within the Puerto Rican community when it comes to black folks.
Man.
So I think that poem was an attempt to address all of it, and of course trying to be funny at the same time. No,
right, cool, yeah.
So
Perry Thomas did it for me too.
Yeah, of course, man. Of course.
Thank you, Taino. Thank you. I feel like we're having some great conversation here, and I hope you guys are enjoying it. Yeah, you're right. I was surprised by the bubbles just now. It's okay. I'm really feeling it right now. So I want to open it up to Rich Villad, and I know that your story of creation is, you were an undergrad. You're of course trying to figure out what you're going to do with your life, right? You're thinking about law at some point, and you would have been a heck of a lawyer.
The CIA or something?
Oh, yeah. Google, baby, Google.
Oh, Google.
So I want to ask you about, now, who is now your friend, but at the time I don't believe you knew him, Martin Espada, and the inspirational poem about a cockroach that crept into your ear and changed your destiny.
Well, there were a lot of poems besides the cockroach poem, but, well, here's, I guess,
Can you guys hear him?
No, oh, sorry, can you hear me now? Yes. Okay. So, the creation story for me. I'm noticing the theme. I like that. Very good. It was maybe about a year out of 9/11, and was extremely confused about various twists and turns that my retail career had taken, most of which led toward minimum wage. And I entertained the idea of becoming a lawyer. In fact, I was about 6 weeks away from taking the LSAT. And in an international relations class that I took with a dude that actually ended up having to flee Ghana because him and his folk were about to be assassinated, and harbored a grudge against the United States ever since. So that tells you what the bent of the class was. In the middle of this class, I met a poet. And I met a poet by the name of Julia Barnes, who happened to be on a slam team at the New York Poets Cafe in 2002. And I heard about New Rican, I heard about a cafe, I heard about this idea that there are Latinos going out to places and reciting their poems, and I said, okay, well, that's nice. But I didn't really think of it like in terms of a career or even a hobby. And then Martin Espada came to my college. He came to Montclair State University in New Jersey, and he gave a reading, and one of the poems was a poem about a cockroach. And it was a poem called My Cockroach Lover. And the poem, when I became a more of a sophisticated reader, I understood that what I liked about it was that sort of surrealist touch that I came to like in poets like Pedro Pietri and Nicanor Parra, and others. The idea that you can write about a cockroach and have it mean something beyond his cockroach was a huge touchstone for me. And I said, well, okay, if he can do that, and he can write this poem called The Imagined Angels of Bread, and all of these big expansive poems about the political imagination, and I was a political science major at the time. I said, oh, you mean I can parlay my love of politics and I can parlay my love of my culture into what I like to do, which is this poetry thing, and be good at it? Okay, maybe I'll give it a shot. So I started going out to these spots in New York. I went to the New Rican Poets Cafe, went to Bar 13, and I eventually ended up uptown at a spot called Acentos. And there were two poets there named Oscar Bermeo and Fish Vargas, who were extremely welcoming, in the same manner I think that other poets have mentioned, these welcoming spaces and the circles where we all share our work. And Acentos for me became this place where, it was very much that old school style where we give the poems and we recite the poems, and some of them are good, some of them are not so good, but to this day, the best part of the gathering is always after the fact, and it's always this this informal discussion about what we heard and what we liked and what we didn't like, and we built camaraderie, we made friends, and there was no competitive thing. I did do slam for a little while, but it wasn't like we were all like gung ho about being slam poets. It was something else entirely. We became a community of writers, and that's what I strive to to be with ever since then. And the catalyst was Martin Espada. And in the process, what I did was I stalked him. I emailed him a lot, and I asked him, all right, can you give me some reading lists and stuff? And he would go a couple of months without really answering me, but then he would eventually, okay, well maybe this kid's not so weird. And then I showed up to a reading at his Cornelia Street Cafe, and I said, this is one of 3 readings I'm doing today. And he said, 3 readings? He's like, yeah. Did you do 3 readings? I said, yeah. He says, what do you write? And that was another huge touchstone for me. I said, oh, writers write. So I don't have to worry about all this other drama and all this. No, you have to go home and write some poems, dude. And the organizing thing is good. Hanging out on the open mics is great. You gotta sit down and write some poems sometimes, man. And you gotta think about what you're doing, and you gotta read a lot. I said, okay. So that's what I started doing. Communicated with him some more. We became friends, and he was the best man at my wedding very recently, and is also a big booster of what we do. And that sort of mentor-mentee relationship. You read about it, and you read about how people just sort of took it like a matter-of-fact kind of thing. And among Latino poets, it's not always so cut and dry, because we are doubly marginalized in a lot of ways, because Latino writers don't catch a lot of love from the American canon, and then Puerto Rican writers don't catch a lot of love from the Latino canon. So in a way, we're kind of doubly marginalized like that. Even among Puerto Rican writers, there's always this sort of like divide between the academics, the quote-unquote street poets, which is really an insult. And there's this, it's a lot of BS, frankly. So for a writer of Puerto Rican descent, Latino descent, to sort of put aside all the other BS and say, okay, young writer, I'm going to show you the ropes a little bit and give you enough freedom to go and and do your own thing. It's gold, man. I can't say enough how precious that's been. And frankly, I've been able to find that the most with the two poets who are sitting here now. I mean, I really, really treasure the friendships that I've been able to make with the writers And the other key thing that I do want to say, for those of us who use terms like OG, which is nothing wrong with saying OG, all right? But I always, to me, the danger for a lot of us younger writers is treating our elders like museum pieces. They're not. They're writers that are vital, and they're moving just like we are. And they're unfolding just like we are. I mean, this story is not over. You know what I'm saying? Miguel Algarín, I don't know if you know this, but some of the newer work he's been doing is just fabulous. I mean, it's unlike the stuff. He read new stuff I remember it was back in '03. He actually read a whole spate of Bronx poems, which I don't think has seen the light of day since. But man, they were just off the hook, you know? And when the danger is sometimes when we talk about these older writers, we talk about them like they don't exist no more. Well, they do exist. And they're among us, and they write, and they're vital. And the opposite side of the coin is, you know, some of those older writers need to realize that these younger writers, although they may be green, you know, are getting less and less green as they go. And there has to be more of an artistic camaraderie, I feel, among the older and the younger generation. So that's why these kinds of conversations are really wonderful. I'm a big advocate for mentor-mentee relationships among Latino poets. I always will be. And I try to do that now, even though I don't really know that much. I try to do as much as I can.
Thank you, Rich Villard. He's actually a great community builder. I know you guys every Sunday do a free writing workshop in the Bronx. Free. I mean, it's a beautiful thing. And how many people in this room go to those workshops? Most of these young writers are in here.
That side of the room, apparently.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The whole front is up there.
And Willie will be here this Sunday.
And Willie's facilitating this Sunday. So, anybody here with a question? Jessica, come on.
Hi. I'd like for you to talk about, I know you have a unique perspective on this, in the formalization process of being a writer, of attaching those letters to our names, right? Of the MA and the MFA and the PhD and the role that plays in being and identifying as a Latino writer, and what that means to our communities.
Well, they sold us a dream from about 2000 to 2010 ish. They said, go get yourself an MFA and you can be a teaching writer, and you can work and be a poet at the same time. So, and that has nothing to do with being Latino. They said, do that and you can get yourself a job. Then the economy collapsed, and a lot of colleges and universities began to understand that, you know, maybe some of these MFAs weren't necessarily getting the critical eye that they should, which is a huge generalization and is not true at all, but that's what they said. So they said, oh, okay, MFA is no longer the bar. Now you got to go get yourself a PhD. And, you know, and then you can be a working writer, okay? So we have to spend more and more money to get more and more money, you know, and to be working, you know, writers at all. This is not to say that you shouldn't do it. An MFA, to me, is simply another way of creating a community, right? And if you go into it without any sort of idea what you want to do as a writer, without any sort of aesthetic in mind at all, you will come out writing like your teachers. And if that's what you want, then go for it, you know? Other programs have sort of understood that and said, why don't we back it up a little bit and let's draw their own processes from them. Maybe they don't even realize what it is, but let's draw it from them and let's let them build on that strength. And then at the end of the program, they may not have everything down pat, but now they are, in the process of becoming their own people and are able to articulate their own artistic processes and can write, you know, whatever books that they want. So, you know, it really depends where you go, because there are a lot of programs that will turn out these sort of, Donald Hall called them McPoems, I think, right? They all kind of look the same, they sound the same, they taste the same, and there's no difference. And then there are programs that will notice talent and will cultivate it. you know, and they'll hire the teachers that they know will fit that mission, and they'll do it, right? And now they have this whole other thing where you get a PhD in creative writing, which is a whole other kind of thing. You're actually, you know, breaking down the creative process and, you know, putting it back together. You give your whole dissertation on, you know, on the mechanics of writing. You know, for some people they need it, and for others they don't. I mean, it really is an individual, you know, kind of a decision. What we've tried to do in some respects with the workshop is to bring that sort of the good aspects of those kinds of writing programs and bring them into places where you can't necessarily, you know, to communities that can't necessarily afford it, right? And to folks who maybe don't want to go to the university because they're busy at their career, they're teachers, they're lawyers, they're whatever they are, but they also want to be quality writers, right? So you can kind of have the best of both worlds in a sense. It's hard as hell to get people to do a free poetry workshop who are, you know, who know what they're talking about in terms of their writing. But that's where we've been really, really lucky, because we're very gregarious people and we make friends. But again, that goes back to, you know, what we learned from, you know, the Stoop, the Nuyo, the Bar 13s of the world, the Acentos of the world. We're not going to make colleagues, and this is what I tell people all the time. Don't go out trying to, you know, meet colleagues and make connections. Go out and make friends, okay? And that's what, you know, that's where you'll sort of bridge the gap between the two.
Thank you. Thank you.
No, it makes me think of that line in Carlito's Way. Friends will kill you faster than a bullet, baby. That's all. I was just thinking that.
Swiggity, do you have time for another question?
One small question from you, sir.
Okay. We're all Irish on St. Patrick's Day. At least that's what they say, right? Everyone can be Irish. I was born on the island. When I go to the island, I'm called de allá afuera. There's people in this room that, for whatever reason, whether I put on a guayabera to hang out or estoy hablando así, you know, cuando nos vamos a juntar, que es la que hay, they've called me a spick-ass nigga. So, you know, I graduated from private Catholic school, so if you have people from Buenos Aires feeling the music of reggae so much that they become dreads, they become rastas, or I even know of a Frenchman who heard guaguancó, and he went down to Cuba and he moved and he started a family and he learned how to play congas and he considers himself Cuban. Maybe we shouldn't think about being Puerto Rican or Dominican on paper. Like, do we qualify like the roller coaster? You have to be this high. You have to be born there. You have to be, you know, whatever. Maybe it's, if you're in tune with the frequency of whatever you're in tune with, then that's what you are. If I want to be Chinese, as long as I'm in tune with that culture and I want to do a dragon dance, then I'm Chinese. It doesn't matter where I was born. Another thing, so it's really what we're most in tune with, and I'd like to know, you know, if you guys agree, if that makes sense to you. Because it's like you have the Renaissance in art, you have the Renaissance, then you have the post-Renaissance. It's like you had the original Puerto Ricans, whatever you might consider those, right? And you have the people that came after them, and then you have my generation. I don't know what I am. I don't tell people that I'm Puerto Rican, I don't tell people that I'm anything. I'm me. And that's just gonna keep evolving. Things never go back to what they were. Just like the universe is never gonna collapse on itself. It's just always gonna keep expanding. So I'd like to know your thoughts on whether that's the way we should be looking at things. And the second part I wanted to touch on, which maybe I know Rich and Willie and Sandra spoke about, is the whole thing with the elders and the people. I don't know if, you know, I'm considered someone who's up and coming, I don't know, whatever, newbies, whatever you want to call them. I've encountered situations where elders feel uncomfortable with these new people who are inspired by their work coming up, because it's almost like a fear of losing that place, that pedestal, right? And and from my point of view, we're not trying to take that pedestal. There's more than enough space for us to share, right? So I know that, so I'm able to deal with those situations that I'm encountering, those types of things. Like, for example, there's certain shows where they only want to showcase well-known names and not people who have equally as good work, who have just as strong of a message. So, but the people that don't understand that, the people that look at it as like, oh, that's just beef, that's where the conflict comes from, and that's where the headbutts between the older generation and the younger generation come through. So my thing is, what are your thoughts on that? And do you see any solutions for those two?
I'm going to keep this very, very brief, because this young lady sitting to my left, who has done a shitload of work on this panel, has not had a chance to talk. So I'm going to say, wait, hold on. I'm going to say, I am 100% Boricua, I am 100% Cuban, and I am 100% American, 100% of the time. If anyone has a problem with that, they can kiss my ass. That's it. Now, what that means to me, I can probably write in several kinds of academic papers, several kinds of blogs, several kinds of tweeting. But the thing of it is, that's a way big conversation. And I think that that's what the aim of this panel is supposed to be. And I can't answer that any more than I can answer. I will say this much: I do believe that we do spend way too much time trying to figure out who's authentic anything, and that has to stop. Right. Mm-hmm. So that's all I'm gonna say about that, and I'm gonna let this question go.
Cool. Great response, thanks guys. And finally, Johnny Bomba Rose, who to me is today's poet. She's eccentric and she's Nuyorican. She's ever present all over the city. Eccentric? You are eccentric. You're not eccentric? Oh, yes, you are. I can tell you stories. I want to know, because your rise was really quick. You just, the other day you were a new poet, and now you're kind of like the connector for Sangre Viva. How did this happen so quickly? What's your secret? Everybody here wants to know.
Well, how it began, I guess I'll go back to my origins as a poet. I was 7 years old, and I remember it was like sometime in the first week of school, and we all had to write a poem. And when my teacher read the poem, her mouth popped open, and it was on the board within minutes. And that was the poem that we were going to discuss. And I just was floored. I'm in first grade, and we're having a discussion about what I wrote. And it was, day by day, the sun rises. Day by day, I go to school. Day by day, I eat my breakfast. Every day is day by day for me. And it sent a ripple through my school, and I became the writer. And my mom was like, she's gonna be a writer. And everybody, she's gonna be a writer. And my name is Iraida, and in English it sounds like a writer. And it was a big deal. It was such a big deal that when I became a teenager and wanted to say, pa'l carajo pa' todo el mundo, I stopped writing. I didn't want to be what I was told I was going to be, so I stopped completely. I didn't want anybody to argue with what I just wrote. I didn't want anybody to say that was wrong or they didn't agree. I didn't want anybody to know what was inside of me. So I stopped. And I had a little boy when I was 19, and there went the rest of that. It was work and my kids and my house, and that was it. And then Deaf Poets came on, and I watched from the living room, surrounded by friends, packed in my living room. And I was like, man, when I in my senior year, I went to the new school. I went to Trevor Day School. I had a big scholarship, $16,000 a year, Puerto Rican girl from the Bronx. Let's put her in a private school. She can write. She's so smart. And I pa'l carajo pa' todo el mundo. And I threw it all out the window. I said, I don't want to be that. And it was also partly because I had been taught that as a Puerto Rican girl from the Bronx, subliminally, despite the fact that I was told I had potential, like you could be this, you could be that, you are this, you can be this. I was just a Puerto Rican girl from the Bronx, and I was not gonna make it, and I wasn't that good. And I kind of had convinced people that I was good enough, but I really wasn't. So in order to not be proven a failure, I ran from it all. And I stopped writing completely. And then a few years back, I made friends with people that were on Facebook, and I was like, okay, there are writers in there. And I had just started writing again, and one of my friends was like, you have to read these things to people. You have to read these things to people. And I was like, I don't want to, I don't know. And then I went to La Pregunta for Capicu. And that was the first time I read when I came back. And I read Mi Coquí. And the next time I went to Capicu in Brooklyn, someone ran up to me and said, yo, you wrote this piece, Mi Coquí. Mi Coquí sang to me through the window, and he's quoting my piece. And I'm like, dude, this is the first piece that I read coming back out. And I'm being quoted. So I felt like I'm worthy, I can do this. And then in order to learn more and to feed that hunger, I went to Acentos and started writing every Sunday with these people that were amazing writers, that were the top level, the people that I had seen on Deaf Poets. And I cried when I watched that show, because I would tell my friends, I can do that. But I said it kind of quiet, because I didn't want to be like, do that. I was like, I can do that. And so now I go and I do that, and I love it, and it loves me and my friends, my community, my people. Like, it's true what he's saying, where I don't go out there to network, I go out there to make friends and to make family and to create a family out of this. And I'm looking across this room from the front to the back. There are people here that I consider very dear to me, that I know will grow with me throughout this. And the idea behind Sangre Viva was that I've been part of lots and lots of fundraisers, and I've put together my own fundraisers for GEMS, which is an organization to help save girls from the sexual trafficking, for Haiti, for tons of fundraisers. And that's where mostly where my heart is, because I feel like as artists we have to use this for a purpose and give back to the community and bring people with us as we're running, grab some hands and keep running with them. And the idea behind Sangre Viva was that I've been part of all these different organizations, and I want to create a family within all those different families and have conversations and sit at a table and say, well, what can we do that's bigger? And what can we do in a way that can really, really affect people's lives and help those girls like me who were 18 and 19 thinking I'm just a statistic, and bring them out of that and put them in a place where they could be sitting at Hunter with no college degree and feel like they have a story to tell that's valuable. And I'm on my way back towards that. I'm going back to school, and I know what I want to do now. And my kids, I have 4 little boys now, and my kids are extremely proud of me. I'm raising 4 Puerto Rican men, and I'm gonna make something out of my life with all of that, because that's where the overcoming is. That's where the hurdle is. Your life isn't over. My life isn't over, and that's the theme. That's the goal.
That was wonderful. That was wonderful. How many mothers are in the room that can understand what it is? Tú también, I hear that. And your father, your mother, you're all of that. But that was wonderful. And you know what? I wish that we had more time to get to all of the questions, because there's so many things that we can learn from each other here today, and learn from you guys. Like I said, everybody has a story.
Let's do it again.
Do you guys want us to do it again? That being said, I want to thank Sandra. I want to thank Willie. I want to thank Rich. Johnny, you and I are going to see each other all the time, of course. And I want to thank you guys for coming out, and our sponsors, the Center for Puerto Rican Studies. That being said, I want to call up Pedro López Adorno to close us. Pedro.
Well, in closing, I think it has been a wonderful conversation, and I hope, and I think everybody here hopes, that we'll continue this conversation with a different group, perhaps, of poets, the same group, but different groups, It's something that we have to continue doing in the next few months, Let's hope we can continue doing it, in a much more regular basis in places like here. It doesn't have to be just here, It could be in many different venues. What else can we say? I hope everybody enjoyed the conversation. Everybody learned something about. I know that I did learn a lot of things about the poets that are with us that I didn't know at all before, you know, and it makes me get closer to them, even closer. Because sometimes, you know, you read them, you know, and I've read all of them, in one way or the other, I've read all of them, but, you know, listening to them, you learn a little bit more about something else that makes us so human, you know, and makes us, you know, so important to, you know, community efforts, you know, cultural efforts. And of course, you know, the history of struggle continues, but we will overcome it, you know, no matter what. And sometimes it's not, you know, it's not whether you call yourself Afro or Black or Puerto Rican or whatever. I think I mentioned at the beginning of my intervention here, the work of a person that I've been reading about and studying for some time, Schomburg, and I call him a black man, obviously, who he called himself. It's not me calling him. He called himself during that time an Afro-Borinqueño. Afro-Borinqueño. So you have to think about it in the terms of the individuals he was dealing with, both Cuban and Puerto Ricans, some white, some black, some mulattoes. And they were all in that racial struggle too. And that's why, well, that was one of the major reasons that by 1898, unfortunately, that Cuban and Puerto Rican Revolutionary Party disbanded. You know, and that's something that hasn't really been studied, you know, still very carefully. But anyway, we're here to obviously go on and continue, you know, our own struggles, and obviously to celebrate our achievements. And obviously this is an achievement.